Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. If the first hour is general discussion, your questions and your answers, your questions are answers, your answers are questions about media and virtual production. The second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. Today, we're going to talk about Office Hours 2.0. Now, we thought we'd be showing you Office Hours 2.0 live. We're going to switch over, but we're not going to do that today. We're going to talk about why we didn't. And so we'll kind of DX as much as we know right now. And that's all good. I'll probably back up a little bit in our system until Thursday. So we'll probably go back to 1.0 for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday as we figure out what happened. So that's and this is what happens when you drill. So anyway, tomorrow we will be talking about number 700. Our 700th anniversary is tomorrow. So we usually every 100 shows or so we kind of think about what we are doing, and then on Wednesday we'll talk about the Olympics graphics. Now we had some special guests at After Hours. We hope to get them back. So Wednesday's probably a good day to come and look at the graphics and then come to After Hours right afterwards. On Thursday, we'll be talking about Office Hours 2.0. That'll be our next launch point. So we're going to, we'll take a look at that and we'll just be talking about Office Hours 2.0. And then on Friday, some good friends of mine, Andy Sullivan and Jeffrey Orthwine, are going to be on. They're about to shoot a film. And they're going to talk about pre-pro. So they're going to talk about their storyboards and their scouting and everything else. We're going to get an unprecedented view of how this movie gets made. So it's going to be shot in a couple weeks or a month or so. And I think we're going to get the opportunity to see some live streams from the space and ask questions and be part of the whole thing. So it's a big test. So anyway, they're going to be on Friday, and then we have John Snyder's going to talk on Saturday as part of our education. Of course, education is the first 2 hours, and then John Snyder is he's going to talk about how to avoid death by PowerPoint. and how to improve your presentations. And so that should be good. That's at 10 o'clock on Saturday after the education hours, which are not broadcasted out. And by the way, before someone asks, with all the stuff that was going on in the morning, I didn't cut and paste correctly into the system, and there was no notes. They'll go out tomorrow. All the stuff I just told you will go out tomorrow in the email. When it went out, I was like, "What happened?" Because I had pasted it all in and had it all set up, but I was doing too many things at one time, so it's my fault. I'm going to cut my pay in half. All right. Now I'm going to hand it off to our host for the day, Liberty White.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. If you are watching on YouTube and you want to ask questions so that our panel can answer, we invite you to head over to officehours.global. And for our producers, this show is driven by you. So go ahead and add some more questions for us as we get into today's show. Let's go.
All right, we're starting out with a question from Chad Lafarge in Columbia, Missouri, and he says, can we have a conversation about how Tony celebrates his birthday? This is a fake question, guys.
Softball, all right. Hey, Tony, today's your birthday, right? Today.
Yes, it is.
Amazing. And that means you're going to have to withstand the song. All right. Now, what we found is that the easiest way to do it is I'll start. And the key is that everyone should just listen to me. I will go slow because it works better when we go slow than when we go fast. Don't try to speed it up. Don't try to do a different one, and don't try to do harmonies or anything else. Just try to follow along. And if we do that, I think we'll get closer, or we won't. And we get to practice every time someone has a birthday. All right. So here we go. Ready? Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Tony. Happy birthday to you.
Many more.
Very good. I have no idea how that sounded because I'm trying to just not listen. So, but
Sounded like drunken sailors.
Yeah, there we go. There we go.
Good.
Beautiful.
Just so you guys know, that was pretty good.
Yeah.
Well,
and Tony, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Tony, how are you going to celebrate? Because we need you to answer that question too.
So tonight, Catherine Harrop, I believe, is going to be interviewing me. She is a Canadian journalist with over 35 years of experience in broadcast TV and newspaper work. And she is also the wife of George Butters. And they are going to I'm going to be interviewed on Conversation with Tony Mobley tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And also, I wanted to share with the community that I have gotten a promotion. And so I have become the Associate Minister for Miracle Bible Way Church of Christ in Macon, Georgia, which is a promotion based on their desire for me to be a minister on every third Sunday of every month. So now I am kind of a little bit hoarse today, for I was ministering on yesterday, and Liberty White happened to be present yesterday for that service. And so thanks to office hours, I have gotten a promotion, and that is a paid position with the church.
That's awesome. Congratulations, Tony.
That's awesome. If you're hoarse after your sermon, I gotta see this. Like, so that's great. That's the different side of Tony for us. So I want to see that. Excellent. We'll have to see. You let us know when the stream is. Thanks. Well, congratulations and happy birthday, Tony. It's good to have you here always. All right.
Next question.
Mitchell Hill in Wilmington, Delaware is up next. He says, Adam Toe, developer of MixEffects, has joined Andy Carluccio, developer of ZoomISO, at Zoom Event Engineering. Since both are members of the Office Hours crew, what does this say about the Office Hours community?
John?
Number one, congratulations to Adam Toe. Number two, if you haven't figured out that there's some really smart and amazing people on Office Hours, then keep watching. You'll learn that. Number three, when they acquired Liminal, the assets thereof, I figured they'd lock up all of the associated broadcast software platforms. So MixEffects, Companion, all these other third-party software tools, and wrap them up all into one great platform.
Wow, that's awesome. Yes, congratulations. Alex?
Yeah, I think that it's pretty exciting to see where the whole team is going there. With Liminal, and it appears that there's a lot of energy behind that. So I think that at MixEffect Pro is probably the most transformative thing for Blackmagic that's out there, and so I think it's pretty exciting to see it go in. I think it's not going into Zoom; it gets to be still its own thing. But having Adam in there, I mean, he's a genius. So I think it's going to be really, really amazing to see what that team starts to put together. I think they're really putting together an incredible F1 team that's just going to push a lot of new ground.
Mitch?
First, I'd like to congratulate Adam Tao for getting this honor of being hired. But for another reason, he was the one that introduced me and brought me into Office Hours. So I owe him for that. But for him and Andy to be working together, he takes a little bit of us with him over there. And when he goes into the event engineering department with Andy, only things are going to be better, and they're going to be kind of a little bit the Office Hours way, which is part of that he takes with us. And I hope that more people get that same opportunity.
Likewise. Alex?
And I would say that it's less the Office Hours way and more the way things want to be. I think that there's a trajectory that we happen to be sitting on that we're taking advantage of. And I think that we're pushing that envelope. But I think that there is a huge future for how people connect online. And I think that that Zoom is putting together an incredible team to make that happen.
Next question.
Chris Roysden is up next in Round Rock, Texas. He says, I have a work conference coming up soon and will be streaming keynotes through Teams Live event. I have been asked about also streaming through LinkedIn Live. What are my options to add this without adding too much cost?
John?
So it's not too expensive to do as long as you're able to capture into another device, whether that be a web presenter and then use an RTMP out stream out of that, or into a PC and then use like OBS in order to stream. There are specific requirements of getting live access within LinkedIn. I'll post a link in Muquana where you can actually see that and see if your page would actually be approved for that.
Alex?
Yeah, the biggest challenge is just getting into LinkedIn. LinkedIn Live, getting approved takes time, and you have to manage that request. And I think you have to have, I think it's 2,500 followers or something like that. It's a certain size of folks. At least that's what it was a while ago. So that's the biggest challenge. You can use Restream as well. So you could just stream to Restream and then send it out to as many things as you'd like. So that's a relatively easy one. And I believe that they have or are going to be putting RTMP in. So eventually, again, the big lift is just getting in. But once you get in, it shouldn't cost you much at all to stream to it. You can use a cloud platform to do it. And that's probably the cheapest.
Yeah, and if you are looking at obviously the company page, a workaround could be just depending on maybe the president or someone on their personal page, because I do recall LinkedIn having this is not something that they're rolling out to everyone. They're really curating the experience. So just thinking about that workaround as well. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Todd Davis in Hutchinson, Kansas. And Todd says, I'm an aspiring panelist, but don't have the appropriate kit yet. How do you feel about lurkers in the Zoom meetings?
Joshua?
Well, as a longtime lurker, I would say the more the merrier. Take as much time as you need to feel comfortable. And you don't have to have all of the best gear. You just have to have a good mic and a camera, a decent camera. Yeah, nothing fancy.
Nigel?
Yes, I think this is one of the great things about after hours, where you don't need to lurk. You can come out and you can be visible and you can get feedback. And it's how most of us first took the steps down the route that is office hours. So find a time. When you search for restaurants, it often shows you peak time. There are peak times in office hours, after hours, just before the show, just after the show. So come out of those peak times and there'll be somebody here to help and discuss and get you going.
Great answer. Courtney?
And how do we feel about lurkers? We don't call them lurkers here. We call them producers. Every day we have more than 100 people that are part of this Zoom meeting, directly in the meeting. They're not necessarily appearing on the panel, but they're contributing questions along with other people out there in the TV land and the YouTube land that are contributing questions. So we never consider them as lurkers. It's producers.
Mitch?
Yeah, those are all good answers. As a relatively new member of the Office Hours crew here, I guess I joined fall, summer. I watched it a couple of times, but because I have a radio background, I kind of jumped in early. But, there's nothing here to be afraid of or scared of, or if you create some kind of button push or something, there isn't anything there. It's just it's an open, honest panel that will help you in every possible way. You have the support of everybody here to make you look good. So come on board. We'd love to have you.
Alex?
Yeah, I agree with everything that just was said. I think that the trajectory that most people take is they start watching Office Hours, then they figure out how to get into Makana and Discord, and then they hang out with us in after hours. And then a lot of folks will jump in the pre-hours. That won't really exist as much after this week, hopefully. But in the pre-hours, you have, the before office hours, there's like a time to hang out with the panelists and you get kind of a sense of how you look and sound compared to them and so on and so forth. And so that helps you. And people will do that for months before they end up on the panel. So I would highly recommend doing all those things. The mic is the most important thing. We can have a lot of things going on with your image. But if you're going to buy one thing, buy a mic, and if you want to know which one, just ask us a question if you don't already have that. But that's the piece of kit that is the most important for you to think through.
And then just from like double Dutch, like jumping in, I find that if there's a day where during the second hour, there's a topic that's being discussed that you're comfortable with, that way that, first hour, you may not answer questions, but in that second hour, that way you kind of ease your way in, because as panelists, we're taking our experience and our knowledge and sharing it. So that's just a practical way as well to when you want to dive in and jump on the panel. So next question.
Nick Badd in the UK is up with this one. What storage do you use for AWS, Amazon Web Services, cloud-based video work? The SSD EBS model is pricing at around $80 per terabyte per month.
Alex?
We're storing stuff on S3, and I don't know. It's definitely not that expensive. so I don't. I am not certain of what the price is, but it's a more raw data storage. I'm not actually familiar with SSD EBS. So, but with S3 storage, it's relatively inexpensive, and it's definitely not not $80 per terabyte, which would be it seems like it's a really pricey solution. But I don't know exactly what it is, but I would look at the S3 storage.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Joshua Minden in Madison, Wisconsin. And Joshua says, SpaceX launched 46 more Starlink satellites this morning. Alex and others have mentioned hopes of using Starlink in mobile production. Is anyone on the panel doing this presently?
Jeffrey.
Well, the first thing that they need to do is they need to make sure that a solar flare doesn't take down their whole system. So bringing that up, that's the biggest issue. But I'm very interested in how this is all working. I remember back in Techonomy, I met Peter Platzer, who is working with Spire, and they're doing the similar work to that, bringing up these. They're basically throwaway satellites anyway, and thousands of satellites. I think for this to really work, we're going to have more than 46 up in the ionosphere.
John?
So we just watched this launch together. I don't know. I had it shared on the screen. Perfect launch, perfect landing. So one of our esteemed panelists is on the beta program for the mobile version of the antenna. The ones that are sold now are basically static. But they're beta testing the mobile version. It's going to be huge for the RV and the trucking industry.
Alex.
Yeah, and sorry, I was getting ready for the next question. I have one. It's not working right now, so I have to figure out why. It after this it just went down, and so it's connecting to my phone, but it says there's no data. So I'm still trying to figure out what happened there. I think it might be with this little solar flare issue. But anyway, so a lot of us are still kind of fiddling with it. I don't have the mobile version, but what I am going to be doing is testing it and taking it on the road. So I'm kind of building up a kit that's going to allow me to take it. And what I'll be doing is kind of figuring out how to power it on its own the best way. I'm probably getting some kind of battery system. And so I'm going to be testing it. I test a lot of stuff at the house first. And then, so set up a battery system, then set up a link, an Amazon link that's going to be connected to it, because it'll handle a lot of the variants is the best, I think, as far as putting that in. And then we'll kind of, I'm waiting for my Ethernet adapter that I ordered too late. So now I'm just waiting for it to show up. So there's a couple pieces but once we get that going, you're going to see how far from my house I can go with the satellite. So we'll stream things from different parts of the Bay Area, trying to figure that out. And then also, can I change the address? Can I change, so I'm going to try a couple of different things, but we'll start testing it. I think it's exciting. We're in early days, so it's going to be a little unstable, but I think it's as exciting as we move forward.
Mitch?
Alex, are you going to be able to carry that on an aircraft, or are you just going to drive it around?
At first, I'm going to drive it around. I can go along, anywhere within a 6-hour radius, I'll tend to drive instead of flying, just because of the time it takes to go through the airport. And I don't like airports. So anyway, so that's what I'll start. Definitely, if it's working, if I get on a plane, there's no reason why I couldn't check it, or carry it on. There's nothing in it that I think would get me in trouble, except for the battery that I might use.
I was going to say batteries. Yeah.
Next question.
Jack B. in Phoenix, Arizona is up next. He says, when capturing multicam footage, what's the best way to get color to match up? I shot some drone footage alongside video from the iPhone 13 Pro Max this weekend, and the iPhone's HDR needed color correction.
Bill.
So I'll take this one on. You should think in terms of 3 layers at least, and we'll talk about some of the other things. But basically, you have LUT application, you have base grades, and then you have look grades. Those are what colorists often talk about. The LUT application often goes into the camera itself to try to make a set of cameras even, but if you get footage in that doesn't have that, most of the nonlinear editors will allow you to apply that LUT up front. So if you have something that was captured in camera with HDR and you need to get it into an SDR timeline, applying that LUT early will allow the footage that you're working with to at least be corrected that far. Next, we're talking about a base grade, and the base grade is usually something done as soon as the footage arrives into a nonlinear editor to try to get that footage as normal as possible. So if there's any anomalies in the shooting in terms of your exposure settings, or if there was a color balance, if you had some weird lighting circumstance, most editors want to get rid of that as early in the process as possible and get everything as close as possible working in their NLE so that all of your sources, all of your multicam footage comes in looking similar. And you use your scopes and you use other technical tools to look at exposure and color balance and things like that to get it as right as you can. Sometimes that's difficult, particularly if you're working with all sorts of different kinds of cameras. If you're working with an expensive camera and then GoPros and phones, they're going to come in with a little bit of different color science. So you do your best you can there. Once you have all those things done, you edit away. And then the final step is what a lot of people think of in terms of color correction, a look grade or a final tweak on the master to make sure everything is consistent across all those shots. Those are the 3 stages. And I would highly suggest you try not to avoid any of the 3. Shoot it as right as you can, then correct it as right as you can, or as early as you can, and plus applying LUTs, and then worry about your final look grades and creative stuff at the end when everything's together.
Alex.
So everything Bill said, but one thing that I would highly recommend is something that looks like this. So this is a bigger version of this. This is the X-Rite color checker video. And this is a larger one. There's a smaller one. There's a Passport that I think that Jeffrey has. The key is, there's you can get a Passport for it. The bigger version of this, by the way, just in case you want to see it, is this. And this is this is a chroma demand chart from DSC Labs. And that's this one has, this will actually, these colors will actually draw, these colors will actually draw in your vector scope. And when it's properly, correlated, it'll draw right through it perfectly. It'll build like so that's but this is expensive. It's like $1,000, something like that. So what you want to do is get that on. You have to make sure that this is in Resolve, in my opinion. If you're trying to match a lot of the stuff, I use Resolve for it. They have an auto matcher that if you have this in Resolve, you'll be able to auto match these together. They will not be perfect. You need to really eye it, use an eye, a qualified eye to really get it just right, but it'll get really close. And so that's one thing that you can do to make that work. So that's, getting one of those ones, just making sure that you have the color checker that matches one of the ones in Resolve makes it a lot easier. If I'm shooting stuff, I generally go through Resolve. If I shoot anything that I'm going to have to color correct, or do a one light on, I will almost always do it. If I'm just shooting, I use Final Cut. Final Cut's faster, in my opinion, a lot faster to cut in. So I cut in that. But if I'm going to do any color correction, I usually will start and end in Resolve, to make sure that works. And it's mostly because Final Cut has a lot of really good tools that are good, but they're a lot of automatic, and I have a hard time with, like, if something isn't right, I don't have the handles to really grab onto it. Anyway, so Resolve will help you with that. Again, what Bill said, you got to get into an SDR. You got to take the HDR to SDR. So you need that LUT to get you there. But you can use these color matchers after that to kind of get it there. But the way to get these colors to match is to have any kind of color chart as your first, near your first frame before you start shooting with everything. When you do that, you have a single, you have a point of truth with all of these. Otherwise, you're just kind of shooting in the dark. I mean, you can try to match them up without it, but it's way easier to have a chart before them. And you'll see a lot of slates that have a color across the top, and that can help as well. It's not as good, but it definitely is better than nothing. So.
Yeah, he notes that he is using Final Cut to pull it together. So he asks Resolve and then moving it to Final Cut. That's what you just said, Alex.
If I'm having trouble with it, if I pull them all in and they all match in Final Cut, I just keep going. like that's if I shot it and the cameras were all set and they all work and but if I have anything that looks like it's going to be hard to match, I tend to go into Resolve and straighten them all out and then send them to Final Cut. Now that is also because my workflow oftentimes, like 90% of the time, I'm using a Blackmagic 6K or Ursa that I'm shooting with. So a lot of it is because I have Blackmagic RAW as one of the components. I might have an iPhone, I might have other things, but so that's part of why I go into Resolve. But you can do it in Final Cut, but you have way more tools in Resolve to match it if you're not getting it just right.
Okay, Jeffrey.
To quickly show, this is the data color spider checker that I was holding up, and this you can get for like $50. There are cheaper ones, but This one actually does go into resolve, and you notice how I flipped it. That's the grayscale right there and the color chart. I got to see the clapper go from, because I was in a production over the weekend where I played a mad scientist, and it was a lot of fun. And that's where I really got to understand how the cameras go from there. One more thing, Ray Maxwell always suggests that you keep it in the sheath, because these colors can fade pretty easy. And this isn't something you can print out on your regular color printer.
That's a good hack.
Yeah, you heard me putting it away, by the way, because I was like, the moment you take it out, you're like, okay, I'm done with it. Now you put it away. You don't want it to get scratched.
Alex?
Yeah, another tip. So the first thing, as Alex said, you're really using Resolve as a DIT software. So you're using it to prepare your footage to get everything into the same codec and do your maybe going from HDR to SDR and getting everything the same. So that's using Resolve for that. But generally, you should use these color cards more than one time a day, because the color temperatures will change over time. So if you shoot in the morning, lunchtime, afternoon, evening, if you're trying to match drone footage with camera footage, watch out for color temperature change as well. Yep.
Lois?
So when you're using a drone, which is going to be flying overhead over something, where do you show it the chart? Because if you're indoors and you show it the chart, the lighting is different than if you're outdoors. So how do you do a color chart with a drone?
I'm sorry.
Alex?
you literally hover over it. you put it in a way that represents the light and hover over it. You just need a frame. And the drone, it's amazing. The drone is really good at staying still. so you literally take it a foot off the ground and look at it in the environment that you're going to be in. You'll get that slate.
Was that what you were going to respond to before, Alex? Because your hand was.
I don't remember now.
Okay.
I know what now I was going to say is that if you're taking it with different devices, I will not. Everybody disagrees about this, but I will not edit with different formats. so I will not create an edit system with that by dragging things in. I will conform. I'm very old fashioned. This is what we used to have to do with Media 100. Like that this was literally like a Media 100 thing that you just conform all your footage. And I've been conforming it ever since. And I've experimented with it. And almost every time we've been bitten, and so it's really, really better to just conform all your footage. You decide what your footage is and you conform all the footage to that. So going to Resolve, the reason I say that is going to Resolve is not something that's an extra step. If I was taking it into Final Cut or compressor or whatever, I would still convert them all. If I was getting drone footage that, let's say, is MP4 or H.264, and I've got iPhone footage in its own little format, I would want both of those to be ProRes before I put them into Final Cut. And so I would do that anyway to get them into ProRes, get them to look, the same. I would do that first because you just get into all kinds of, almost all your export wonkiness that happens in both Resolve and Final Cut comes from them telling us that they can put it in and that not being true. So.
Next question.
Next one comes from Ray Franklin in Mount Dora, Florida. And it is, Alex says, YouTube views are not as important as how long they watch. What are the matching metrics for the office hours YouTube and .global views?
I think it's watching metrics.
Alex?
Yeah. So again, we'll pay attention to view time. I mean, I will admit that I am kind of old fashioned in the sense that I think that a great conversation is what we'll worry about the most, and just that we're putting out good content and that content is getting better and our answers are getting better and we're having a better, conversation. I think that the other stuff follows. I don't need to, I think people make a mistake of watching their metrics too tightly. I do pay attention to them, overall number of people that are in and everything else, but, and how long they stay and all those things. But I don't worry about them as much. You can always turn the marketing pipe up. Like you just turn that up and suddenly there'll be a lot more people watching. But the question is do we have something to watch when they get here? And so mostly what I'm focused on is trying to make sure that is a viable thing to watch. And I think we just keep getting better every week. And so I think that that's what I'm worried about. Once we get 2.0 to a point where we feel comfortable with it, we'll start putting it on a lot of different platforms, and mostly it's just so that we understand how those platforms work. I mean, one of the reasons, there's always many reasons that Office Hours 2.0 came over, was to really understand Zoom. And so by streaming to LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter and Twitch, we're going to understand those platforms, like how they work and what streaming is and what their idiosyncrasies are and everything else. Do I think that's a good idea for most clients? I usually recommend against it, but it's like everything else. It'll be our R&D of figuring out how to make this all work. So anyway, so that's what we're going to do. And then again, we're going to be pushing out a lot more. So, I mean, we'll have a lot. I'm not worried about finding enough listeners. I'm mostly worried about us making sure that the quality of the experience is high when they get here.
John?
I think Alex has said this before, but I love it. It's also one of our pillars of the company I work for is relationships versus transactions. Right? It's not about the viewer in the moment. It's about the community that we're creating, getting those people connected into Discord after hours. Those are the things that really matter and really make this special.
Jeffrey?
And it's good to know that this is actually across the line. Where we're doing a talking head long form piece, there are some YouTubers out there that are doing shortcuts, getting information out within like 7 to 10 to 12 minutes or whatever. And but still the watch time is the most important thing. And that's where chapter markers even start to come in, is because then you start on the point, and instead of hearing all the ramble about, hey, subscribe to me and all that other stuff, you go to the point where you need to go. And then it's the question of whether they continue to watch after that chapter is done, or if they decide to cut out within 30, 40 seconds. And then once again, that becomes a marketing thing to try and get your numbers up, but it's about that view time.
And while this question is speaking specifically to office hours and what that looks like numbers wise, overall it's a really good principle. Alex has shared in the past that he can judge in creating, the second hour guests and knowing what topics will work and what won't, because then just watching how many people drop off. So just wanting to just add that in as just why looking at, there's numbers, but then if you've got, 50 people watching and the watch time is like they've watched almost the entire thing, then that's content that you should continue to create and bring people back. Alex?
Yeah, and some of them we actually look at also as investments. We go, well, I know a lot of people aren't going to watch this, but this is a conversation that is important to us. It's kind of like running a running play when you should have thrown the ball in football. That's a sports reference. Sorry about that, but we should probably no religion, no politics, no sports. So anyway, but I think that's you're sometimes you're doing something because you're trying to build something, test something. It's an important enough conversation that we want to gather it. So again, I definitely pay attention to numbers. I'm a numbers guy, but I don't let it drive what we're doing. I keep on looking at, are we enjoying this conversation and is it working, and so on and so forth.
Next question.
Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana is up next. He says, for a 4K streaming workflow, what's your sweet spot for bandwidth if you're streaming to YouTube?
Alex? 35
megabits a second. That's what when I do 4K, I send it 35 megabits a second as an ingest, and then YouTube will cut it up. That gives it that is from a relatively good recommendation. so anyway, that's the right, that number is about right for sending it in. It gives YouTube the teeth it needs to properly make the transcodes effectively.
Okay, next question.
And it comes from Liberty White in Atlanta, Georgia. What's the best way to use an iPad to teach a virtual class, in this case, editing a video, while tracking the movements to make it easier for the viewer to follow the instructions?
And I'll jump in with for more clarity, as I was teaching how to use an app to edit some video. And when I was going through and trying to show certain things on the tablet, it's still just the app. So I wasn't able to actually here's a tracker to show them that I'm talking about, input, this plus sign over here and input. So I was just curious if there was a way considering, and sorry, also my chain was the tablet into the ATEM and then streaming that out to LinkedIn. Alex?
And I don't have my adapter for my I was going to show you with my iPad. The best way to do it is to build some kind of telestrator system over top of it. So when I show stuff on an iPad, typically, and I literally just pulled it off so I could charge it. But when I do it, I have my little telestrator and I have the iPad. And the way I do it is I have this, you can't really see it, but I have a 2-arm suspension, one holds my Wacom tablet and the other one holds my iPad, and so they're just kind of floating there. And so then what I can do is I can do stuff with my iPad and then reach over and draw on it and go, the typical, this is the typical thing where I'm using my wacom tablet to draw on the piece. Somehow I turned it off. Anyway, so that's.
Okay, so I might be missing something here because I'm using I'm mirroring essentially out to the audience the app on the iPad that I'm using. So you're saying I can telestrate while also using that app on the iPad. Does that make sense? That's what I'm.
What I do is, I'm running into a switcher. so I'm running into my extreme, and for some reason I somehow. I don't know. This morning,
I can come back with this question later this week.
Ask it again later this week, and I'll actually show. I'll make sure it's working. If I see your question, just ask it early. Because again, this is for all of our listeners. When you ask stuff early, what happens is I start setting up. Like if you ask them at like before 6:30 in the morning Pacific Standard Time, what I'm doing is after I do the little announcement is I'm going through the questions. And I'm trying to pull up examples and pull out things that I can show. It's sometimes why I have things right at my fingertips is because someone asked it early and I can do that. But yeah, I'll ask it again like Wednesday and I'll have it all set up.
I was going to say Wednesday. Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. John?
You could try it over the shoulder shot as well. So whoever you're teaching is actually watching you push around if you can't get a telestrator set up easily.
I like that one. That's a good call.
That works well.
Okay. Awesome. Next question.
Craig Kadoki's up next from Toronto, Canada. The other day on Office Hours, someone asked about the future of AI in production tools. A recent update to the audio editing app Twisted Wave now uses speech-to-text recognition to overlay the text above the waveform to make editing easier. How cool is that?
Courtney.
Well, that's pretty cool, but it depends, as far as using AI to edit with, it depends on the amount of I that's in the AI. There are tools out there and have been for years that let you actually drop the script into some editorial software and it will create a rough cut based on the text in the script and the metadata in the files of the text that's been translated from the audio. So it'll automatically understand the audio in each take and create a metadata file which has that audio as text, and it can assemble a rough cut or at least assemble bins that have that audio, that have that text contained in those shots. So it can put them all together in one bin for you so that you can make your selections for everything that's pertinent to that particular scene that you're cutting. But the worst thing I hate is something that cuts on the beginning of each line to each person that's speaking, and it becomes very mechanical and it takes the breath out of a scene. I like to be able to put pauses in where the other person is thinking about what was just been said before they speak and things like that. Because if you cut all that stuff out with poor AI, it ends up being a very mechanical cut and it's really difficult to watch. But our editors here, which are far more skilled at that, can probably speak more on that.
Craig? You might be.
Sorry, I missed my wrong button. So Twisted Wave has this new feature, and what they say, like Courtney said, it does do the synchronization, and you can actually bring in a PDF or a text file into their system, and then scan through the text to find the place in the audio, vice versa. What I find is really cool about this is they're using the Siri engine, which their information claims will let you use any language that Siri will accept to run this, which I think is pretty interesting. I haven't tried it yet. I'm waiting for a time when I've got a few hours to sit down and actually dig into it. But I think it's going to be an interesting idea.
Mitch?
Call me old-fashioned, but I find it distracting. If it's a cool technology, no doubt, but my process for editing, when I'm doing tops and tails or just editing a piece, I'm using the markers that I put on there when I recorded it, and I'm using Scrub to hear where I am. So, a lot of times if I got to go through a block of text and it's close, I'm just doing it 2-3 times speed so I can understand where I am, what I have to do. But to Courtney's point, I would never let an AI, well, knock on wood, but I will not let an AI cut, because there is a natural tempo to speech that you must follow, and AI can't follow that tempo that when you're reading, you need to know where the beats are.
Bill?
It's been probably 2 years now that I've been watching as speech to text has really done it fast. Before that, there were a couple of years when only a few friends of mine were messing around with, particularly my friends at Lumberjack Systems, who were really early in the Mac space in terms of handling both subtitling and automatic speech into text processing and allowing editing of text to edit video and things like that. And I just think Amazon and some of the other big in the cloud web services got to the point where they could understand text, and then a lot of people started putting it in there. We've been hearing both sides of it. I do think it can make some things really easier, and a good example of that is subtitling. We often now upload tracks of audio, particularly spoken word, and then let the cloud turn around and translate that and give us text that we can bring into our timeline. So it's pretty simple to do that now. But there's also a piece of the puzzle that is when the tool you have is a hammer, every problem starts to look like a nail. And I do think that we shift over the course of time as we get these new kind of automated AI tools. It sometimes takes us away from honing our skills that are underneath what that AI is trying to do for us. So I would just urge a certain amount of balance there. I don't think it's wrong to use these automated tools, but I think at the end of the day, your instincts as a human being making content for other human beings are always going to trump anything that can be heuristically built into an AI system. So just never stop using your ears and your eyes and training them to pick up those tiny anomalies in creative work.
William?
Also be careful as you go from one AI to another. We also have artificial stupidity out there. The Zoom voice to text is terrible for mathematics and other technical fields in comparison to, let's say, what Google is capable of doing or YouTube.
Good point. Lois?
I'm wondering if Craig might come and do a lab in after hours at some point. And since you're going to be experimenting with this experiment, and let us watch you do it.
Yeah, if I can just, I would love to play with this in an after-hour session. Just to be clear, though, what I find exciting about this is that if you've got a large body of text that you've recorded, audiobook or whatever, just the speed that this allows you to find specific things. I agree with what Bill and Mitchell and other people have said about not letting the AI do the actual editing, but being able to find stuff quickly and be able to do that search for sections in the recording is what I find really the advantage of this tool.
Next question.
Next one comes from Simon Ray in Shrewsbury in the UK. He says, can the panel recommend a browser plugin to restyle web pages to a darker theme? It's less than comfortable reading, I guess, a pure white background when you are used to dark mode on an HDR screen.
Courtney?
Yeah, there's a problem with that. And if you put your computer into dark mode, several things respect that dark mode and several things don't. There's a browser plugin called Turn Off the Lights. They're very needy. It's a free plugin. They ask you to donate a lot, but you can put that into the Chrome browser or Safari browser. I think they make it for several browsers, and then you have a little icon up in your toolbar that you click on and you turn that on, and certain websites will then observe, it can then deal with the CSS and convert it to dark mode, but certain sites lock it up and don't let you do that, depending upon how they constructed the website and whether their graphics are have white backgrounds on them or not, and they use a lot of JPEGs. So you'll have limited results with almost any of those plugins because there's many websites that won't conform to it.
Alex?
Yeah, what Courtney said, and the main thing is, even our sites don't. We have a dark mode in Mukana that the dark mode breaks. so that when it does these kind of hard shifts, it can make it not work very well. And I just wish more people would build dark mode sites. I agree with you that, especially depending on where I'm at, I might not go to sites if they're white. Like if they're really white mode, the dark mode is way better.
Jeffrey. You're on mute.
Yeah, so the one other thing you need to worry about with all these things like Night Eye, Dark Reader, Turn Off the Lights, Midnight Lizard, Noir, which is a Safari one, is the terms of service, reading those terms of service and seeing what type of data is being passed through. Because sometimes what they'll do is they'll read your browser history and then determine if this site would actually work with our plugin, this one didn't. And so make sure that you go through this. Chrome actually has a setup, and that's what I was working on. Chrome, if you go into the Chrome flags in the settings and then search for dark mode, you can actually enable the dark mode, and that'll bring a lot of, there's my website, and then if you want to go to Amazon, that's the data color. There, it's not going to be perfect. As you can see, the pictures are white backgrounds on, of course, this now black color, but that's a way to kind of bypass that as through Chrome. I'm not sure if Safari or Edge have anything similar to that.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. Can any tips on multiple presenters on the internet clicker at once?
Alex.
So there's a couple different ways to do it. I know that there is a remote mode for Keynote, so you can have multiple people actually have tenancy in a Keynote document and be able to take control of it over different times. Another one you might want to look at is Internet Clicker. InternetClicker.com has a way that you can actually, it'll let you control those things and run those keys from the web page. I have to admit that I know about it because I know other people that have used it. I haven't used it myself because I use Keynote. And then the final way is to rehearse. So you a lot of times with the stuff that we do, we rehearse with them and we have somebody else running it that knows when in the presentation we need to move to the next thing. And that really helps because a lot of us are not allowing we're mixing video and we don't ever play video out of a presentation. So we're very, very rarely, usually we're running that unless it's embedded into the page. So, I mean, if it's full screen video, we're going to do that as a separate thing. So it makes it easier for us to rehearse with the speaker and make that happen.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Chirag Cheetah in Dallas, and he says, looking for a drone that can have a mounted camera to stream out from an outdoor sports field. Any decent budget-friendly options?
Alex.
Yeah, the biggest thing you want to think about is, do you need a specific camera or do you just need a video from the sky? And so video from the sky, most of what we've used are Phantom and Inspires, for that. Bill, you got them open mic. So Phantom and Inspires are the things that we use the most for those types of things. And then after that, we start to install, we get octocopters and we put Reds and Blackmagics and all kinds of stuff on them. And so those become the bigger ones that you can mount on those. Transmission, a lot of the transmission that we use for the larger cameras have been actually Teradeks. The smaller ones, the Inspires and the Phantoms, it's just a matter of you're getting the right receiver that can output typically an HDMI, but sometimes an SDI output from the wireless transmission that it's actually getting. But there may be some less expensive solutions, but those are the ones we've used.
Next question.
Jeffrey Powers in Madison, Wisconsin says, looking at the Phottix Solar BG Magic Light, it suggests that this is a great light to emulate sunlight. Does anyone have any experiences with this lamp?
Bill.
I just looked it up a little bit. It looks really interesting. It's a relatively small light. And so when you say emulate sunlight, the sunlight has a couple of characteristics to it. Number one is its color temperature. And depending on the atmospheric conditions around it, that can be anywhere from 5,600 Kelvin way up into 7,000, 8,000, 9,000 degrees Kelvin on a really bright, clear day with cloudless skies. So getting the color temperature to emulate sunrise or just sunlight is not a particularly big lift, but the amount of light that the sun puts out, getting any light, particularly these kind that really run off of USB or small current, to give you the punch of sunlight is a really tough thing. So I would make sure it's giving you enough light for the circumstance in which you want to use it. Maybe fine at your desk for webcamming, to balance a room that has a little bit of sunlight in it. But I wouldn't try to get it out to light somebody if their back's to the sun on a regular day. It's just not going to have the punch for that.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. Is anyone using iPhone 13 cinematic mode regularly?
That's a great question, Alex.
I'm playing with it. It keeps on doing things that I don't expect it to do. And I keep on feeling like, it's a little bit of it's cute, so I haven't been able to get enough clips in a row where it did what I expected it to do, to use it in anything other than having fun with my kids. So.
Next question.
Eric Price in Kansas City, Kansas is up next. He says, not a question, but a word of thanks to the Office Hours crew. During a virtual script read-through with a local production company, I was complimented by the owner on how wowed he was by my lighting and camera setup. First time from a boss rather than a client.
Congrats, Eric. Alex?
I think this really, I mean, it is something that you just have to do a lot, and being around other people. So whether it's after hours or eventually the panel, I know that, obviously my kid, not with my background today, but my kit generally is really strong, and it's really stable because I'm using it every day. And so I would definitely take more advantage of the panels, the after hours, and so on and so forth. It does make a difference. Like, it does open doors. It does give you more authority. It does have people listen to you more when you have a better setup. It shouldn't be that way. That's not fair, but it's what it is.
So true. Next question.
The Seven Scroll, friends in Brooklyn, says, we recently purchased a Wacom 1 tablet for telestration. Thanks, guys. Can the mini ISO work, or would you need a mini extreme ISO model?
William?
I'm actually adding to the question rather than answering. Could you also address that for the ATEM Television Studio HD?
Alex?
Yeah, you can. I've used these with almost every ATEM switcher, except for some reason my Wacom turned off today. Anyway, but yeah, this is a little trick that doesn't really matter. You just have to make sure if you're doing it with a television studio, you have to be able to convert the HDMI out of the computer back into something that can go into the switcher, but and vice versa. So that's the only thing. What you're doing is you're sending the Wacom tablets USB control to your Mac Mini. You're sending the Mac Mini's HDMI to the switcher, and you're sending the switcher output to the Wacom tablet. And so what that little loop-de-doo and watching the program allows you to telestrate. And so it doesn't really matter. You can do it with the smallest ATEM. You can do it with a 2ME Constellation. You can do it with a Extreme. Anything that you can have, but it just takes up that extra input on the way in, and you have to have a separate output that you can send it to. So that's the only challenge is if you need to use your HDMI out, you have to use the HDMI out for the Wacom tablet. And then you can use the USB-C in to there. But if you need to use that for encoding or something else, then it doesn't work as well.
Courtney?
Yeah, pretty much what Alex said. And the only thing you're really using is either upstream key or downstream key in the switcher. And all of the switchers, including the minimal one, have that upstream and downstream key that's accessible through the software. So once you set that up and set your background to either green if you're doing an upstream green key, or black if you're using a luminance key and you're using color drawing, then that will work for you. Alex uses a more complex where he draws white on black and then adds the color later, but you can do it either way. I use a pre-multiplied key.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. He says, my alma mater has several parking spaces for electric vehicles on campus. Considering the cost of a Tesla is firmly in the luxury bracket, what mid-price electric cars do you see as best these days?
Nigel?
Yeah, I was actually going to challenge the assumption slightly about the Tesla being in the most luxury. You can buy yourself a secondhand Leaf for $10,000, $12,000. You can buy yourself a hardtop Mini for $30,000. But you've got to remember there are two variables that really matter in buying your first electric car. How are you going to use it? Are you going to do long distances? Don't forget that I'm lucky enough to have an X, and I get like 300 plus miles on it. Some of the electric cars get 100 or less, so you could only ever do short trips on it. The second thing is, how are you going to charge it? And one of the advantages of the Tesla is the supercharger network, at least in the US, that's Tesla only. In Europe now, that's starting to become, they're starting to open Tesla supercharger up to other people. So think about not only the price, but how you're going to use it in terms of the journeys you take and how you're going to charge it.
Dennis?
Yeah, I agree with everything Nigel said there. I would say look at the second-hand market. The key thing really is how big a battery you want. The expectation originally, and going back sort of to 2015, was that electric car batteries were going to need replacing every 5 or 8 years or something, and it's turning out that the technology is more robust than people were expecting. So secondhand cars are a good route to go down. A Leaf or a Zoe, either of those would be worth looking at. But yeah, have a look at the secondhand market. You'll probably find a pretty good deal. That was where I got my first electric car.
Craig.
I would agree with all that. I think there's a bunch of mid-range cars. I think somebody mentioned the Mini. I know here we could get an electric Golf from Volkswagen for quite a while. The other thing that I like to think of is when people talk about battery range and mileage, not only what sort of long trips you're going to take, but what's your average, what's your short trips, and don't get more battery than you're actually going to need. Save the money, and then if you are doing once a month or once every few months, longer trips, the savings from not carrying more battery than you need or going up to that higher model might just be more than what you need to rent something that gives you that range for those few times a month or a year that you need it.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is asking, would it be worth it to purchase Resolve Studio if Resolve is your primary editor?
John?
Disclaimer, I don't know if this violates Blackmagic's licensing. What I've done in the past is I find people that have Blackmagic cameras that use Final Cut, and then I work out a deal on their free license that they get with the camera.
Alex?
Yeah, I would almost always buy a camera before I bought Resolve, because the Resolve comes with the camera, and so that's usually the easiest way to go.
Next question.
Alex Goldner in London says, when someone is presenting using a shared Keynote presentation, if others are sharing the editing of that presentation, can they make changes to the slides?
Alex?
I don't think you can update the slides until it's out of presentation mode. So if you're opening it up in presentation mode and someone edits it, I don't think it will allow it to edit. I know that when I do that, I'm constantly dropping out of it and then popping back into it again. And what's really cool about it is when you have other people editing, you have it sitting in iCloud and you have it opened on your iPad or whatever that you're going to present from, you can just you just come out of a presentation mode and do it. But it shouldn't update for obvious reasons. It shouldn't update the edits until you're out of presentation mode.
Next question.
This comes from Stephen Eiselman in Lincoln University, Pennsylvania, and he says, a while back I bought my wife an avid bird watcher, a beginner's camera, a Nikon D3400, and a huge piece of glass lens, a 150 to 600 millimeter, and was wondering if you could suggest a budget-friendly zoom camera to use in its place. And he says he's an avid MacBreak Weekly listener.
Alex?
Yeah, I think what I'm trying to figure out is if this is like, can we upgrade to a new camera, a budget-friendly zoom camera? The problem really is that it's not the camera. The camera is not the expensive part. When you start to I want a big zoom or I want to do birding, you're talking about long lenses, and so that's the thing that's the most challenging with all those. A 150 to 600 is great. I don't know if I would go less than a Nikon 3400. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I'm just wondering, because he says zoom camera, you don't usually, there are zoom lenses, but cameras don't usually do that unless they're video cameras. And I'm wondering if he's interested in allowing his wife to videotape birds. If so, that is a whole different kettle of fish. And there are manual clamps that you can use with birding binoculars to affix like an iPhone, and I've had some success with doing quick videos of birds that way, but it's either that or some of the binoculars are sold with internal video recording. If that is where you're going, and I'm not sure you are, then it's a whole nother world to do video of birds or other flying objects, and it takes some research.
I just add that, Stephen, if you want to come into after hours and ask that question again, just so we can dialogue with you a little bit more or even dropping it in Discord, so that we can best answer that question for you. So we have at the top of the hour where we're going to talk about the switch, turning on the switch to Office Hours 2.0. Alex?
we went to pull the switch up this morning and then it just didn't move. It was like, can't get the switch to, it's stuck. And this is, this is what I love the part from Armageddon where they're only 50 feet in and there's a card. And he's like, this is what happens when you drill. So this is what happens when we drill. We haven't taken as much ground as we thought we would today. And that's the nature of it. We're doing something that no one's ever done before. So I think that, I don't know if anyone here, I guess Richard might, I think you're the one that crosses over between, and Richard and Dennis both are crossed over between 2.0 and 1.0. What it looks like, obviously we have the 2.0 bouncing around here. So it looks like we might have found the switcher. What happened?
So, and just for 2.0, I'm going to raise my hand on the question, so therefore I can appear in super sources and things like that. So we're not too sure just yet. I think we're going to run through the different troubleshooting methods, but the main thing that we experienced, just as Alex is saying, is the constellation wasn't findable. So since I think the first time we found the constellation crash was last Thursday, and it meant that it's no longer available on the network. So we can't connect it with MixEffects, we can't connect it with software control, we can't connect it with a USB connection cable, and we can't connect it with Universe or any other machine. So it's really similar to a question I raised around about 2 weeks ago. So there's what I suspect at this stage, it's something to do with either Universe or MixEffects, or the combination of the communication between the two. So in troubleshooting, we're probably going to now go back and kind of start to build the tower of Jenga software that we have that runs 2.0 slowly back up and see what's working. It is working now, and JJ did a fantastic and massive job to get it running on time. So we were able to start the show on 2.0 if we had decided to. But there is a fair amount there we have to troubleshoot to try and understand what is crashing the constellation.
Alex? Oh,
and one thing that I'll say there is that I'm sorry, wrong Alex. But the one thing that will destabilize, I probably own over 50 ATEMs, almost every ATEM made. And there is one thing that destabilizes it. Well, there are two things. Water, a lot of water in the constellation will destabilize it. I found that out the wrong way. And but the second way to do it is multi-tenancy. So two things talking to the ATEM can ask it to do things. It'll pull it in two different directions at the same time, and it'll come off. And we've had some that never came back. so like it's like, and I think I wasn't totally clear of how we were doing that, but I think that we're going to have to pick. One thing needs to talk to the switcher, not two, because it is the one thing that it does not like at all. And I've literally lost switchers to it. I lost a 2ME to us doing that, and I don't think I really realized how we were interacting with it. And it's not that it'll happen all the time, but when it happens badly. And so I think that we're going to have a discussion about. It's got to be one or the other, and I think that in the case of our infrastructure, I think we probably need to think about having MixEffects Pro be the one that is talking to it. And so Universe talks to Isadora. Isadora should be talking to MixEffects. And doing MixEffects does what Isadora tells it to. But I think we need to keep I think it's this separate pipe. Again, it's not going to always happen. The problem you're going to have is you're going to back up and start building back forward. The problem is it's not always going to happen. It's going to happen when there's a certain number of things together, but it'll be this bad again, if we do that. So after 10 years of using ATEMs, multiple things talking to it makes it unhappy. Yeah.
Alex Goldner.
I think maybe it might be also that there's that button marked brick, which actually bricks the switcher, which is quite a dangerous one to press. But I was wondering in the case of... I
told you not to press it.
It's written in black lettering on a black background. But I was wondering, can Isadora also send out the messages to a much simpler solution? So if 10 minutes before the show starts, there's a kind of a cut down version of Office Hours 2.0, which looks similar, but doesn't use MixEffects, or just uses different technology, or doesn't use the switcher in some sort of way, which is a kind of bare bones fallback position. In other words, what about backups?
Is Richard or Alex? Is that a Richard question?
Yeah, we have backups in place at the moment. We have we made a Universe stage that goes to the video hub. So we can route the video hub into program that goes into the Elemental. So we can route. We could cut an entire show on that if we really desired, which obviously we do not. So we have programmed certain backups within the system already. I think the problem that we've found, obviously, with we haven't got a backup for Isadora necessarily. So if Universe we don't have a backup for remote control if Universe completely goes. We would have to go back to local control. So Isadora is the brains of the outfit, putting information then to MixEffects, and then MixEffects sends the information to the ATEM. So Universe communicates to Isadora, which communicates to MixEffects, which communicates to the ATEM. That's the standard pathway. We added additions to that pathway to allow us to do things like transitions and stings and things that where the Universe talks directly to the ATEM. So that's what we're going to go back now and start to check that routing and understand whether is it MixEffects causing an issue? Is it, as Alex said, two masters? Should we route things, as Alex mentioned, to Isadora through to MixEffects, or through from Universe to MixEffects to the ATEM? So those are the different things we'll start to play with, and we can play with them quite quickly. So it shouldn't take too long to run through and check for stability.
Yeah, and for everyone, what we'll do is we're going to pause for this after this. The next time we'll go live, we'll attempt to go live, is on Thursdays. This is like a rainy day in a launch, so we'll spend a couple days. You'll see us kind of working through it and seeing if we can't get back to a more stable state. But I think it'll be fine once we not have a lot of things coming, looking at the switcher. And one of the things we're looking at is, can we get a second constellation at some point, so that we have two switchers in play, so that if one becomes unresponsive, the other one can kind of take over. And so that'll be another piece of that puzzle.
And I was hoping, like in this open discussion part as well, for those who are watching that maybe this is their first time, or they just, if we could kind of go take a step back to just explain what Office Hours 2.0 is and how that is different from what we're doing right now.
Well, what we do right now, if you're watching this, is that we are cutting in. We have a cutter that is cutting. Lois, in this case, is cutting what we call 1.0. This is how we started. We started with this, a long time ago, almost 2 years ago now, was that we just cut in Zoom, and we've kind of figured out how to do it. And then we use the internal streaming from Zoom to YouTube. A couple of problems with that. One is the cutting is kind of clunky. There's not really any graphics, and the resolution is lower than we expect. And so it's a clunky solution, but it's been working. I mean, we've done it for a while, and we can keep communicating. The goal is to there's a couple of reasons that we're doing 2.0. One is to make it look prettier. We have a lot of panelists who have spent a lot of effort, and time and money on how they look and sound. And we want to take full advantage of that. And so by moving it to our own editing system, we can, really cut something, add graphics, add context, and just, and this is just the beginning. Like, we can now play out stuff. We're going to have a 4K HDR version that's going to let us learn a lot about HDR and high resolution and so on and so forth. And so there's a lot of things that we're already doing. And again, I think that there's an opportunity for us to break some new ground on how broadcast gets done. Instead of it being a handful of people who spent years and years and years, learning how to be a broadcaster, it can be a lot of other people talking about things that they love. We're talking about media because that's what we do. But this format, I think, could potentially work for almost anything we're passionate about, and so we're breaking the ground of figuring that out. You have to start with media, because otherwise, if we started with gardeners, it would take forever to get them to learn how to use the cameras. But if we take people here who know gardening, they can teach everybody else, and they can show what it can do and everything else, and kind of spread out that way. So this is the right place to start, but I think it can apply to anything. And so I think that we have the opportunity to make it. I think the possibility is building big communities online that are related to what we want. I've started to call them what I call conscious communities. That means that we're consciously choosing them. Most of our communities we don't choose. We were born somewhere. We have the family that we have. We have the community that is around the house that we bought. We have those things, and those are kind of accidental communities. And these are ones that we may be very diverse in where we live and what we look like and everything else, but we all have a center of something we're interested in. And I think that that's what this can help build. It also means that while the lift has been hard for some of our panelists to get to where we are, it's a fraction of what it takes to do a normal broadcast. And the result of that is it opens it up to a lot more experts being able to be part of a conversation who are true experts, not experts at broadcasting, but experts in their field. That's not something we see on TV very often. We see are people who are experts at talking, and not necessarily experts in the field that they're actually talking about. And so I think that we can make a dramatic difference in the kind of information people get as well. So that's what we're trying to build. The other opportunity is because it's open, this kind of open source kind of build, not open source and legally licensed, but open, like we're showing everybody how we do it and we're putting it all together and anybody can volunteer to help, is that everyone's going to learn how to do it. So this is probably, I think, about to become one of the best places to train and practice. My goal is always to let people be in this industry without having to spend any money. Like me, I got into it by taking on projects one after the other, and so this is a great place to train, folks and learn how this all works.
Richard.
Yeah, I think I was raising my hand on an earlier point, but I'm happy to continue the thread. What's interesting, just to inform the community about as well, is that we found MixEffect reporting that it's conflicting with something else on the network that's giving OSC, and there's nothing else on the network that is giving OSC in the same way. So definitely, there's an interesting debug kind of conversation going to be coming up and going to play in. The interesting thing about training is quite difficult, because what I was hoping for, and this is just me, is that we would be able to have the show running and then use ME3 and 4 on the constellation for training at the same time as we were doing a show on 1 and 2. Now that seems like it's not going to be possible in the future, because if it is Universe and MixEffect conflicting with each other, then MixEffect is the main driver of the SuperSource look. So we have to choose, and MixEffect is the obvious choice for that. So it does kind of limit how we can train whilst live, but it might also open up other opportunities for the other shows like Birding with Lois, who are on the same system as the main training shows. In fact, Laura and Lois have already offered that as well. So if anyone who wants to get used to 2.0, the system or the basics behind it, that's a really good option, as well as the main 2.0 training itself.
And I also think that one of the things that we can do is also let people do a little bit of training in the pre-show. Obviously, Saturday can be a training thing. And then also we're going to have more and more after hours sessions, and basically setting those. We're going to move those after hour sessions into a breakout room, and we could potentially use every one of those as a test and a training and so on and so forth as well. So there could be a bunch of, because that's going to be less viewers and less, so that could be another training, because we'll end up within the next couple months, we'll end up with something like that every day, as far as that goes. And so it's just a matter of, figuring that out as well. But yeah, I think that we probably ought not try to do too many things at one time with it, based on our current experience.
Alex Goldner.
The BBC in 2017 and 2018 did a program called BBC Expert Women, because they found that there weren't enough experts on UK news and current affairs shows and documentaries who were women. But of course, there's just as many expert women out there. So they did media training that was free, and in which they'd actually be able to end up with a show reel that then they could put on YouTube, and then various people putting TV shows together could meet those expert women. Maybe it is worth specifically scheduling in different time zones for experts to come along and say, hey, we'll spend half an hour with 4 or 5 of you at a time, and we'll set you up and stuff like that. So it's more like an appointment thing in after hours.
Neat. Alex?
Yeah, we could absolutely set up test sessions that are letting people do it. And again, this is why we've hoped a lot of people would join and learn while we were in the back end of things, because it'll get a little bit more structured as we kind of move forward. But I think that, I think we'll find places. Again, the weekends, we're not planning to broadcast. I know we've done Office Hours 2.0 on the weekends, but that's not something that, there's a lot of unbroadcasted time there where people can train to do that as well.
All right. Next question, which I think answers the question that we just had, but actually,
right.
Bill,
Do you want me to read it, or should we just? William Hillary has hand raised for it. but it's basically the same thing we've just been talking about.
William, did you want to make a point?
I had absolutely no idea how my hand got raised for that. I have no expertise in this area. And honestly, I don't know how my name got under the question about the ATEM and the telestrator. So that's two, and something's possessed here.
Well, we're happy to have you on screen with a question. Let's go with the next one.
We'll move on to Josh Kaufman of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, who says, for Office Hours 2.0, the co-host position in Zoom seems like a more important role during the show. If there is a dedicated back room for the panel and one for tech, then a co-host can not only navigate freely between the rooms, but move guests in as well. Does that make sense?
Alex.
I don't fully understand the question.
And the BO was breakout room.
Yeah, breakout room. Sorry.
I don't know. I mean, again, what we're trying to do is not use other breakout rooms as the place that we talk unless we have to. I mean, we'll have another breakout room for people to watch the back end of this. But in general, my plan is to use communication is going to be based on Unity, to make that work as far as people talking. But I guess if they need to see stuff, if they need to see the screens. And in that case, again, I'm trying not to do everything at once. Obviously, we're having trouble getting one thing off the ground. But but eventually what we want is to have those rooms be something that everyone can watch, those screens. Now, the communication between the team may be in Unity, but the screens, are what's happening in the back end. What we'd like to do is show people that happening, and so people can watch the behind the scenes. And that's another way, as we talk about training. Eventually, if we do expose all the comms, now not let everyone talk into the comms, but people be able to hear the comms. Watching that tech version of our show might be something also that helps people get ready for it before they start actually pushing buttons.
John?
I think what I take away of this is almost like creating a green room for our guests for the second hour. So then they can, get fed in something to watch. They could talk to each other about whatever they need to talk about. A producer could be in the room speaking to them, trying to prep them for whatever is coming, and then bringing them into the main show when they're ready.
Well, for that, we're definitely doing that. That's definitely what we're going to do, because it means that they don't have to show up at 6:40 in the morning. Like they can show up at 7:30 and be ready to go, and they're in a nice safe space, and then we just drag them in. We don't have to, and we see them the whole time. And I mean, that's absolutely coming. If that's what the question is, it's absolutely what we're going to do.
And I think in regards to the co-host being a much more important role of those people moving the hosts through those processes.
Right.
Yeah.
Or the guests, sorry.
Traffic management. Dennis?
Yeah, so I think the point was that if you are a co-host, you will freely be able to move into whichever breakout room you choose, whereas normal people without co-host access would have to be brought in by someone with that access.
Yeah, and I was going to say is that I think most of the time that we'll just have we'll have a lot of co-hosts, to kind of move things around. Yeah.
Next question.
Morgan Price in Victoria, British Columbia, up in Canada, says, in our lab, we often talk about iterative releases. Trying to find the right components to release in stages can be tricky. For Office Hours 2.0, what parts could have made sense to go live with in a 1.1 or a 1.5 version? And he notes he's not suggesting changes today.
Alex.
The architecture is so different. There really wasn't a place to do 1.5. There was just a place to do 2. Now there will be a 2.1 and a 2.2 and a 2.3 as we add little bits and pieces of stuff back onto it. So, there are some larger infrastructure issues that we probably will get into that'll be 3.0. So we'll have to decide that's a 3.0 thing. And that's not going to come until we'll start testing it in the fall. And the goal will be my goal eventually is to sync it up with the year so that, we start the new year with a new version, and it can be an entirely new architecture. But I expect like 3.0, I expect to be just a higher performance version of 2.0, whereas 4.0 is probably in the cloud. So it'll move there. And so that's kind of in my vision of what that looks like at the moment, looking out a couple of years. But I don't think there was any way to go to 1.1 or 1.5. We just had to know that we were going to shift into this because it's just a completely different thing than what we were doing before.
Yeah, and there was just so much to even think of what a halfway point to where you actually where 2.0 is wouldn't have been conceivable. It was just going.
And to be clear, like this is something we've been working on for 6 months. Like it's not something that and when we had a little, I mean, this is what happens when you try to launch and everything else. At least it wasn't a rocket. It didn't blow up in the air and everybody survived and everything else. And so it's not, this is what, but again, this is, we're very close to launching it, but it's been 6 months of constant iteration and hard work by the team. It's an incredible thing that we're putting together and we'll have it running here this week.
Alex?
I was wondering one possible use for an after hours 1.75 or 1.8 would be as a fallback position when both constellations break and you have either a simpler switcher and you wouldn't have name lower thirds, but you would still have multiple sources and be able to switch between sources in the moving video background so that you get the feel of the show. And if it's as long as it's produced in the same way and run by the same people, you will actually get a fallback position like a second backup.
Dennis?
So 2.0 does include some of that stuff that if the intended system weren't fully working, there are backups that we can go to. And as Richard pointed out, it turned out that JJ was actually able to get the system up and running in time for the start of the show. So 2.0 has been being cut throughout today, even though it's not being streamed anywhere. And that's one of the things that we've been doing in preparation for launching is just every day cutting the show as if it were actually going out, even if it isn't.
Alex?
And in general, especially as we launch it, you'll find that I'm pretty conservative live streamer. So if I see idiosyncrasies early on, I'll usually just pull right back. That's kind of my knee jerk thing. Will not be to try to step into something that I can't see. And our backup is also we have the 1.0 like this. What we're doing right now, we can always back into. So, but I do think that additional hardware and some additional backups will be put in place, and we'll figure out how to do that.
Richard?
Yeah, I would agree with Alex's point. What's helpful by going back to the main backup, the 1.0, is that it gives the team time without the pressure of being live to discuss and to think things through and just to step back. If we were going back, if we had kept to our time and pushed forward, which we could have done and streamed out, we wouldn't have the mental space to kind of discuss it and say, okay, well, what's our troubleshooting list? What are we meaning targeting? Let us individually as well as a team think it through and discuss it. So it's very helpful being that conservative and kind of holding back. But there are a fair amount of backups in place, which we proved we could work with. So that's good.
Awesome. I will take this opportunity to say that we welcome you to post your questions in Mukana so that we can continue this amazing discussion on 2.0, which is coming this week. Next question.
Next one comes from Douglas Carmichael, and he says, if you have two constellations, wouldn't you need to synchronize configuration information between the two?
Richard?
Yes, and also no. So what's ahead of the constellation is a video hub, which controls most of the main routing. But the ATEM constellations and most ATEMs are really easy to update config-wise. It's a simple config file that you can save and upload to across multiple, in this instance, constellations. And you can selectively choose what goes into that config or what's saved to that file. So it's relatively easy, but the main routing is actually done in a video hub initially, and then it comes to the constellation, which then has a secondary routing. There's multiple kind of layers that allow you to just really quickly offshoot into other switchers or multiple switchers. The only thing that's maybe different in this instance is that if we have two constellations, we need two MixEffects to connect to the constellations. I would say it'd probably be better than trying to connect one MixEffect to two constellations. I don't know, Alex, because you can connect MixEffect to multiples, but it'd probably be better to have two separate ones on two separate machines.
No, we'll keep on working on building up two systems, two instances of that. Absolutely.
Next question.
Craig McFarlane in Boston, Massachusetts, U.S. says, is there an Office Hours 2.0 diagram to show how it flows through the systems and tools?
Richard?
Yeah, Andy, way back at the beginning of the 2.0, did a really good breakdown of it in one of the previous episodes, where he kind of went through all the different software that's connected to everything. The main thing to think about is that the video hub and the constellation, which are at the heart of it, are the main brains, and that's so if that's a constellation and that's a video hub, then it mainly goes into basically we have 5 Mac Minis, which I'm going to draw very, very poorly now, which all flow into the video hub, which then go into the main constellation, which then goes out to the I believe the elemental link, and then what controls the constellation is MixEffect, and then what controls MixEffect is Isadora. And then on top of that is Universe, which then helps tell Izzy what the remote producers want to do. So that's the main system. There's also inside of that a multi-view 16 for us to be able to see all the different people. So that also comes out of the video hub, but it also goes back into the constellation as well. So we can see, we can get that grid view like we would have in Zoom. In fact, I think it's 2 multi-view 16s is ultimately how it's routed.
Next question.
Morgan Price in Victoria, British Columbia up in Canada says, just a follow up to my 1.5 question. I'm in awe of the work happening in Office Hours, and especially Office Hours 2.0. I've learned so much following the Office Hours discussion. The work here is amazing, and that it is a public work is even better. So a comment.
Alex.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that I just want to thank the team. I mean, it's just an incredible amount of effort, and people have been putting in really creatively thinking through this and figuring out how to do it. And I do think that we're on the verge of, as it starts to really churn and work, really changing how people think about broadcast, and thinking about what is a broadcast. And I think that we're on the front edge, and that's why we want to try to keep it as open as we can and have people able to watch it.
Next question.
Lois Richter in Davis, California says, what will the change to 2.0 mean to panelists? Are there things we panelists will need to do differently?
Great question. Alex?
There shouldn't be too much change, at least currently, as far as what panelists do, other than going to a different place. We were going to go to a different meeting today, but that didn't make sense for what we ended up doing. But so for the next couple of days, it'll be the same. And then after that, it'll be a new meeting place to go for the panelists. Panelists probably being, as we go into this, being trying to get here by 6:30 would help a lot, 6:30 Pacific Standard Time, so that we really have time to make sure that the system's running correctly and getting their names in and getting into the panel view, and then, not turning off anything after that. So, that's a very typical thing. Just give you a sense. I've been on broadcast. I've been a guest on a broadcast, and like a major broadcast. And one of the things you get used to, they call you, they want you to sit somewhere for an hour and a half, like check in. They check in real quickly, and then you sit there. And you just keep on, and if you get up, someone calls you. Like literally, you stand up to do a bio or something like that. Hey, how you doing? What's going on? So and so you'll check in to make sure you're there. But at 20 minutes, they don't want you to ever move. Like do not move, do not leave, do not, we want you to stay right there. And that's what typical broadcast looks like. So we've gotten used to Zoom and being a little loose about that, but as the show becomes seen by more and more people, I think the panelists have to understand that we're being seen by more and more people, and to stabilize the system, we'll need to take it more seriously.
Dennis?
Yeah, by and large, it's exactly the same process as we've been following for the last 6 months. Couple of things that you need to remember, though. The Fenwick framer, make sure that your head is positioned correctly. Your eyes are on the upper third line and your head fits within the oval. And as Alex says, once you join, keep your camera on. Even if you're stepping away, keep sending us a signal, not just black or turning your camera off, so that we can check that we've got you in the system correctly. If you've turned your camera off, or if you're just sending black, then there's no way for us to tell whether we're actually getting your video signal routed correctly.
Alex?
And again, we'll also probably start pushing a little harder on, color and brightness and other things like that, just to make sure that there's also what we're not paying attention to right now, because we've been paying mostly attention to the SDR feed, is there's an HDR feed. And so we'll want to keep on making sure both of them, start to get into the same color space. So there'll probably be a lot more comments in that area.
Next question.
Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Up next with what's the priority when selecting critical partners for the components running Office Hours 2.0? Stability of operation or flexibility to work with other components or attentive prompt developer reactions to features, stability requests? Please give examples of each.
Alex.
Well, I would say stability is number one. like it being a stable app is number one. Number two would be the prompt developer reactions. So knowing that if it's not stable or something needs to happen, things can be changed quickly, I think are pretty important to us. And that when those things are changed, they're largely stable. So I think that our use of these programs, both for MixEffect Pro and Universe and other things that we're using in Isadora, we're increasing the workload that we're putting a lot of these apps under is increasing their stability because we're just seeing a lot of things that are kind of on the outer edge of that process. But that's what I'd probably prioritize.
Next question.
George Butters in Halifax, Nova Scotia says, is it a good idea to have panelists watch the behind-the-scenes production? And is it a good idea to have the behind-the-scenes crew sit in the panelist seats?
Richard.
Yes, most definitely. I think dogfooding your own work and getting to see every stage of it, I think, is always a great idea. I mean, it's one of those things that you're taught when you're starting to train at as a director, is that work every level. I think that works in many different industries. Spending a day in other people's shoes is usually quite a good way of finding out, how important, just as Dennis just said, how important is it that panelists leave their camera on? Well, it's really important because it breaks things. Like, it literally breaks things. How important is it that you name yourself properly in Zoom? Really important, because it breaks things. And then that means that we have to spend an extra 5 minutes debugging. We have to check back into the main Zoom. And likewise for the behind the scenes crew, how difficult is it to sit here paying attention to one specific camera for 2 hours without getting up or turning off your camera? That's very hard to do. So it's appreciation of everyone's level. This team and community in general is amazing at appreciating each other. What work you're having to do, what time you're putting into it, and just how hard what we're all doing is. It's an absolute, no other community that I've seen gives each other as much leeway and respect in that kind of way, and it's absolutely amazing. But yeah, panelists come into the behind the scenes, and behind the scenes come into the panel. And likewise, we all want to share the behind the scenes more, and that's going to be happening more and more as we show everyone exactly how it all works.
Nigel.
Yeah, I was just going to echo what Richard said and maybe add a little codicil, which is, even if you don't think you're going to be in the back end cutting and the back end, long term, you've got to live the experience at least once. Partly because you'll get a sense of how much and how many people are working on it. But B, you'll get a sense of some of the things that as panelists we're doing wrong. I'll give you one of them that I clearly learned from the day I tried to do some of the cutting. When you've agreed to answer a question and your name is on the list, don't wait until your name is called to look at the screen, because what happens is you're giving the SuperSource team a pain, because you're the one person looking away, and you won't see that and how annoying that looks until that SuperSource is in preview and they can't cut to it because somebody is not paying attention and waiting for their name to be called. And I think some of those things are, you instinctively know that, but until you see it, it's really hard to get that clearly in your mind. And so I would encourage you, even if you don't want to do this for a profession, don't want to do this long term, you should walk in their shoes, as Richard said, at least once.
Lois.
So as many of you know, I am working on a project out of office hours, which is Birding with Lois. And we are practicing every Wednesday as if the show were going. I have taken training in the past couple of weeks on Office Hours 2.0 in the morning, and have done that because it means that I, as the host or the producer or whatever you want to call it, of my project, I know what I can reasonably ask for and what would be a real pain. Not that the people wouldn't try to do it, because they're really accommodating, but if I know what the back end looks like and I know what the processes are, then I can be a better manager of my project, and I can be a better panelist.
Yeah, great point. And to that, Lois, it was a couple of weeks ago, I think I had asked in after hours of, do I need to do I need to click if I'm going to respond, both as a host, but I want to respond to a question. And by being in the back end, that would help to understand the workflow, because I think the decision was no, I don't. But in after hours, George was like, yes, please do, because it makes our job easier. So I wholeheartedly agree about being on the back end, and I'll be there soon, guys. All. Joshua?
I would echo basically the same things. I've trained on Traffic Manager or Question Manager, and I just started training on cutting earlier last week, sorry. And this is my second time on the panel, and so it really makes a huge difference having seen the back end and then joined the panel. And you don't want to, things like Nigel mentioned, like slouching. You get comfortable sitting for a long period of time and talking, and you start to slouch, and then you remember that there's a lower third that, and you've heard the technical directors in the background saying, "Oh, he's out of frame," or he's out of, he's blocking the lower third. So it's just good to have that experience and understand the effect.
Dennis?
Yeah, absolutely. As Joshua just mentioned, we have actually renamed the role of Traffic Manager to Question Manager just so that the initials are easier. Rather than having TD and TM, we've now got TD and QM. The other point about watching the behind the scenes is that that's going to become an awful lot easier once it's in a breakout room, because you can just go to the breakout room and watch what's going on there. And hopefully we'll also be able to feed the audio from Unity comms into that breakout. So you'll be able to hear the chat behind the scenes as well.
Alex?
Yeah, and in the opposite way, I think that it's good for the stat, anybody working on it to be on there. A good example, to the opposite of what Nigel was talking about, is super sources. If you leave the super source up a lot, the one thing that happens is suddenly you're freezing all of the panelists. So that that's something you don't think about. Like if you just put it up on a super source and let it sit, we're all sitting there waiting for, it gets to a point where I'm waiting for you to turn it off. like I'm sitting there I can't believe we're still on this, because I have to sit here like this. I have to go do something, because there's this symbiotic thing where the panelists shouldn't be typing and doing other things when they're on the super source. So it's important. Like I always have the program up now, so that I can see where I'm at. But it's important for the panelists to look attentive when they're on the super source, and it's important for the engineering to not keep them up in that state for longer than they have to.
Good point. Next question.
Robin Cutshaw in Atlanta, Georgia. Next, as an Office Hours 2.0 viewer, how will we be able to switch between viewing SDR and HDR to compare?
Alex?
In the beginning, it's just going to be very simple. The SDR is going to be embedded into Mukana, and the HDR will be an extra thing that will pop into Mukana. Like here's the link to the HDR one. We're not going to focus on it being the primary playout system, but you'll know where it is. As we move forward, we will probably build what I'm looking at doing is building an HDR version of Mukana, just colors, so that they're a little bit more muted, so that right now, if we put the current Office Hours into it would burn in on some monitors. So we need to make adjustments and accommodations for that. So we'll be working on that to make that possible. Can't hear you, Liberty.
Next question.
Eddie Martinez is up next from Paulo Sidra, and he says, can you comment on estimated budget spent so far for hardware, software, virtual machines, all in? What's the dollars?
Alex?
I've worked pretty hard not to try to track it. so I buy things that are really, because it would make me, I don't want to explain to my wife how much money we've spent on this. And so, but I think all in, we've had some equipment has been loaned to us to do this, and then some of it has been bought. I think that as far as stuff that's been loaned to us, I think it's probably in the $30,000-$40,000 range. I think I've probably spent maybe 20 on it, somewhere in that ballpark. And then we have another donation coming in at some point when it's available, which is the FSHDRs. Not a donation, but a loan again for those. And those FSHDRs, there's combined is about $60,000 worth of hardware. So I think that we're kind of in the 125 range, for the hardware for the beast that runs the thing. And so that's kind of where we're at, but I think we'll keep investing in it most likely as we go.
Next question.
Josh Kaufman up next from Pittsburgh with how does the demographics of how people experience office hours change when the transition to the 2.0 version is complete? How might this enhance the audience connection to the show?
Alex.
Yeah, so I think that once we do the transition to 2.0, when we say complete, it's probably going to be September, October is when it's done, and it's completely shifted over. So the kind of the trajectory of this will be that we have, and we talked a little bit this yesterday, but right now we're trying to get it running. We will start to, my goal right now, if everything's running smoothly all the way through March, and it just runs like clockwork, then we're happy with all the graphics and we're happy with all the bits, and we think that it looks as close to a broadcast show as we can make it. In April, somewhere between April 1st and May 1st, we'll start putting it on more platforms. So we'll start putting it on Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitch and all these platforms to let to push them out. The other thing that we're working on is getting a live listening tool that a couple people have volunteered, but if you're interested, ping me in Discord. But we're going to build an app that does that, a dedicated app, first for the iPhone and then eventually for Android, that you can just listen to it, and that may grow into something that you can play. So you can watch it on a dedicated app to kind of see it there. And so those are things that we're trying to do over May, June, July. The other thing, so multiple platforms, possibly something that's a little bit more dedicated. And then our goal, by August or September is to start, we're going to see if we can find the funding to allow us to start putting it up on satellites. So that'll, if we put it on 4 satellites in the world, we can basically make it available, to a lot of other people. And to what Josh was talking about, it could dramatically change the demographics and how many people are on it. I mean, I think that as we open up to multiple platforms, we'll go from, right now, if concurrent, we sit between 200 and 300. Total viewership is between 300 and 500 a morning. And then there's more, but watch YouTube later. When we go to the multiple platforms, that'll probably go up by a factor of 5 or 10. So it'll probably be, across all the platforms. My guess is within a month or two, it'll be, over, well over 1,000 per morning, concurrent. And then when we go to put it on dishes, if we're able to get that funding, it's expensive, so we have to. We got to figure that out. But if we get to that, we're probably looking at going to. My guess is at least it could be anywhere from 100,000 to millions. Because we're going to make it available. I mean, basically anybody with a dish in the sky can pull it down. And in some places, what will happen is that you'll have TV and radio that just want to fill time, and they'll put it in because we're going to make it sure it's clear that it's free to air. And so, so that'll be kind of where we're kind of growing over that. And that's 2.0, and its completion will be, distributed that way. And then 3.0 will come behind it and take full advantage of what we've learned.
Bill?
One of the things that's been fascinating about this to me is having gone through decades at NAB and watching technologies that usually all had this same path, which is we'd see it a couple of years early at NAB. Then eventually, if it required hardware, you'd see the early adopters get that hardware. And then eventually, if it was good enough technology, it would filter out to consumer level products, and it would maybe make a change in the industry. Color TV and things like that went through that process. This is a little bit different, and I think in part because Apple and all the other smartphone vendors have put out products, the iPhone, the iPad, and I'm sure there are Samsung products that are equivalent that have the ability to see better quality than the broadcast system of the past was used to serving. So I don't think there's going to be that same gulf between the people who can afford to be early adopters and take chances. I think when Alex gets this settled in place and we are putting out an HDR excellent sounding show, there's going to be the potential audience already around the world of tremendous numbers of people who can see the qualitative difference literally from day one. And I just think that's kind of one of the game changers here. You don't have to wait for just the early adopters to build an audience. There's a huge group out there who can play right now.
Nigel.
One of the unhappiest years I had in my marketing career is when I owned naming for a large part of a corporate, one of the 10 largest companies in the world. And naming is an unpleasant thing where everybody is a professional. and whatever suggestion you've got is not good. But I do wonder whether, Alex, as we head towards having tens, hundreds, maybe millions of users, whether the name Office Hours is the right name going forward.
I've thought about it. It's just really hard to change. Like it's, there's a lot of times you just backed your way into something, and I didn't expect this to last or grow and everything else. I think that unless we're legally challenged for some reason, which would be difficult because there's so much prior art and so on and so forth, and I think that it just says what we do. Like that's the hard part, is that it's very much an office hours thing. And I've wrestled with lots of other, trying to figure out some other name and whether we could change it, and probably should have. But I think that at this point, there's an awful lot of water under the bridge. We have a nonprofit with the name on it now, so that's a lot of infrastructure. So I think that maybe someday we'll change it, like Meta. Maybe we'll call us Meta-ish. But I don't know where we would, I don't know where we would go. So I think that at some point I went through the thought process that you had for a long time, and I just couldn't find a proper way that would lose something. Like it just feels like it's what it is.
I wonder whether it could have like a secondary name, Office Hours 4, and use the 4 where we need to be more descriptive.
Possibly, yeah. So it's we'll have to keep playing with that though. It's a very valid point. I just don't have an answer yet.
Yeah, and that could work from a marketing perspective. The tag, and I'm sorry. See, this is me now. Like I didn't raise my hand because I'm really
you don't have to raise your hand. You're the host.
Oh yes, I do. I was told by folks in the back end.
Oh, okay.
But just that would help just from a marketing. So we keep the main name because that's the overall brand, and then whatever comes under it, like for ... So
well, I've had thought about it, just like Office Hours : media, Office Hours : gardening, Office Hours : cooking, that kind of thing is a possibility. Not that I have, but I think that we are. At first, I was afraid other people would ruin it for us, but I have a feeling that we're going to ruin it for everybody else, because as it expands, you won't be able to do anything else with the name, other than because the name being so ubiquitous will eventually, I think, pull people back to us as opposed to pulling people away.
Yeah. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. With MixEffects being a core component of the 2.0 architecture, are you concerned about the developer of MixEffects joining Zoom full time?
Alex.
Much more bullish about MixEffects with the developer, because MixEffects hasn't been brought into Zoom, but the developers inside of Zoom, the opportunities for the integration seems much higher. So, I mean, being able to really understand what's necessary to make all of that work, I think that I'm super excited that Adam has both a MixEffect Pro and works at Zoom, because I think that I don't know the ins and outs of that, but I think that it's going to be great.
Richard?
Yeah, I think with another developer, maybe you might be slightly worried, but it's worth noting that Adam has developed, he's gone to pains to say that MixEffect is his intellectual property and he will still work on it. And he was a full-time developer at another place. So, he's used to doing, burning the candle at both ends. Now he's just burning one of those at Zoom.
There it is. Next question.
Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania says, how can the machinery and editing provide guaranteed periods of downtime for panelists, hosts, and readers when they are certain they can be off stream? This is helpful to take a drink or prep for a question and so forth.
Alex.
The tally. So we're going to, we're both through, whether it's through Unity or through the tally box, the system that we're building with the microbit, having tallies that really clearly tell people when they're on and off will be useful.
Bill?
Well, my personal habits have changed. I didn't do it before, but the Office Hours 2.0 square in our Zoom feed now, I have never dragged to a particular location, but just a little bit ago, I started bringing it into the upper left-hand corner, and now I'm just starting to realize that when I see a super source, I should annotate for myself whether I'm in it and whether, therefore, I need to freeze in position and not do stuff. Alex has said, though, in the past, things like a sip of coffee or something like that is important for being able to articulate and not let yourself dry out. So while we don't drink or while we don't eat or do weird things while we're on camera, so to speak, a sip of something is pretty natural.
Alex?
And I'm putting a new monitor right there, which is going to be the edit, so that I can just have a dedicated monitor that's just showing me what the output is. So that's one of my solutions also, is just to have a monitor that has it.
Yeah, Bill, I'm with you too. I've moved it over so that I can see it's like, oh, wait, I'm on screen. Don't. Okay, now go drink. So that I'm right there with you. Next question.
George Butters in Halifax, Nova Scotia up next. Should the show host assume she or he is on camera nearly all of the time? And how does the production crew give the host a break?
Alex.
I mean, the main thing is staying on fulls as much as possible, the full frames as much as possible. I think that we want to get kind of into a pattern of like the grid. We show the grid when the question's being asked. I think that's a good place to have that. When we start going into the question, we show the super source, but a lot of times, and when we go back out to someone transitioning, or if there's a back and forth, we go to the super source. But when people are giving their answers, what's really useful for the host is for that person to be in full frame. There's sometimes people get creative about going back and forth to the super source and then back to the full frame when people are answering the question. It's okay when people are transitioning, but for us, what we need to know is that there's someone talking right now and I can go do whatever I need to do until they stop talking. So once we cut away from the super source to the person, my request is always not to go back to the super source and let that person be full frame unless there's a back and forth or something else. But it's really hard on me as a host to do that. When people are coming back, suddenly I'm caught, and I'll notice that I'm that way, and you'll see me kind of pull up like this because I'm suddenly noticing that I'm in frame, and so right. That's a kind of a tricky piece of the puzzle.
Next question.
Next question comes from Liberty White in Atlanta, Georgia. Can Dennis and Richard speak on what the experience has been like leading this innovative team? Any key learnings?
Richard.
Yeah, I wouldn't describe it as us leading it as much as we are all a very gracious community of people who've come together to decide to organize it. And to help each other organize it and to support each other through this building of the system. So Telalock is kind of our go-to for our key decision maker when we have to kind of funnel things through. Otherwise, it's all about helping kind of organization, whether it's Josh and myself with the Google Sheet, or whether it's the training, kind of getting people in and out and making sure that they've got time to run the system and getting comfortable. It's all about just organization and helping people move through and train and get comfortable with everything.
Yeah, that was kind of my point of asking. That was just, there's so much happening in how the decision-making process, and this is all new. So the innovation side behind it, like how do you keep that? And everybody is also still volunteering as well. So Dennis.
Yeah, I'm definitely not leading it. I'm just one of the people who is going between doing question management and technical director. And it just happens that I've ended up being the person who ends up talking to the panelists pre-show most. So perhaps that's where that perception's come from. But no, there's a whole team of people and there's no one leader. It's sort of all very egalitarian.
Richard?
Yeah, egalitarian. Vive la France. So it's a really interesting system to be part of. That it's worth saying that there's plenty of opportunities for people to still get involved. All you have to do with most of the projects in office hours is raise your hand and say, I want to be involved. So if you just go to the 2.0 channel in the labs and say, I would love to do this, or I would love to do that. Part of the problem is that there's so much going on, as Liberty said, that there's the universe building MixEffects. We've got a whole new debug that we're going to start today. That it can be very difficult unless we know that you are interested and we know what you want to do. It's a bit hard to kind of go, okay, yeah, come on in and jump on in this. So it's all about it's an open system, but you have to raise your hand and say, I want to be involved, and then there's usually very little barriers to coming in.
Lois.
So one thing to keep in mind when you volunteer and you say, I want to help, I want to do something, understand that you may not be called upon immediately to do what it is that you want to do. Don't be put off by that. A lot of the times these folks are working so hard, they just don't have the opportunity to take the time to go, okay, so Lois wants to help. Now, what should we have her do? It's don't be put off if it takes a while to get in.
Excellent point. Next question.
Craig McFarland in Boston's up next. He says, how much, Alex Lindsay, did you manage? Oh, I'm sorry, this is different. Dennis Champion Walker in Mansfield, Great Britain. Alex Lindsay, did you manage to get photos of the Office Hours 2.0 beast to share with us?
Alex.
I'll be down at the office today and tomorrow. So I'll take some photos and for you to see them.
John.
JJ posted something in the Discord to one of the video racks. I don't know if that's part of the system.
There's just one. Yeah. There's just one right now. So yeah, that'd be it. So there's some in Discord, but we'll take some more.
Nice. Next question.
Craig McFarland in Boston now with this one. How much do the non-HDR optimized panelists stick out from the good HDR panelists? Will there be regular after hours times to get feedback for tuning it up?
Alex.
I mean, generally, it's optimizing is just full brightness, full depth of brightness, and that's what makes it work. So not being too overly exposed and not being, but general. I think that what we have to do is look at the scopes. When we are going to spend some after hours working on this, but generally looking at the scopes when someone's in there and take a look at, are we getting, are there portions of them getting to the right height, and so some folks look a little bit, they look a little bit darker in SDR. They just look a lot darker in HDR. So I can look at this and tell you that Nigel, Bill, Joshua will definitely look pretty dark in HDR. Right now, it's just the exposure, the full exposure is not quite there in that range. Lois, I can't tell because sometimes that kind of frame, it will look really good and sometimes it won't. And I can't tell until I see it in HDR to know. I'm still training in that area. We know that, for instance, Alex looks really good in HDR. It's just, there's something about that frame that just goes, and just really feels like it's a, something that's there. And so we know that Tony looks, really good. It really pops out. The colors behind John look good. So those are all things that we're still figuring out, and so but that's why we're going to do it. I mean, that's why we're going to do HDR every day and eventually do 5.1 audio every day, is so that we keep on training our, our eyes, and we see things that work and we get assumptions that work. And it's really, you don't get to do that very often, so that's the thing that allows us all to learn together.
Yeah, that's why these updates are so helpful.
Yeah.
Next question.
I think this is the last one today. Craig McFarland in Boston says, are there parts of Mukana that are different between Office Hours 1 and 2 for panelists and producers?
Richard.
No, there's no real intrinsic difference between the Mukana that we have now and the one for 2.0 because they're exactly the same. What is different is the importance of certain key details, which we're already kind of introducing. So the importance of that pin and getting that pin right is really, really key to 2.0. So there's things that will be more and more important as we run through. It's worth noting that it's easy to accidentally create two Mukana accounts. So just make sure that you know which pin you're using and which pin you're answering with. So I had a problem earlier on because I started a separate Mukana on a different browser today, and I've now accidentally created two accounts, and I raised my hand with that new account, but I have my pin from my old account in. So the system couldn't find me. So just be careful understanding what you're actively using and that you've got your right pin in. Those are kind of the important parts.
Alex.
Yeah, and we will be making some updates, trying to get, the big thing we're trying to do is get the panelist view into Zoom as a Zoom app, because what we really want to be able to do is not have to have two windows for the panelists. And then the next step will be to try to do something similar with participants and so on and so forth. And so we're still working on a bit of those pieces, but they'll be coming soon. But right now there's no change.
Awesome. Another great show. I want to say thank you to our producers for all of your questions, hanging with us for the past 2 hours, to the panelists. Phenomenal job as always. And now if you're looking for more, you can hop into After Hours.
Sorry. I had the wrong page. You did so well, and then I was like, she threw it was a perfect pass, and it just bounced off my numbers. So anyway, anyway, yeah. I just want to say before we close, just an amazing amount of work, and an amazing accomplishment. We're so close, and that we did recover, and I just pulled the plug early. But I just want to really commend the team for the incredible work that they've done, and it's really looking good. I've been having I've been pinning the other window right next to this one. and it looks really good, and I think that we're very close. And so we're going to back up a little bit for the next couple of days and then make sure, and we'll just run it in you'll see it running in the background again as we work through that, but then we'll make another pass at this on Thursday. All right, now we're going to jump into